Please spend the next 5 minutes working on numbers 4 through 8, and please pause the video here for the next 5 minutes. Okay, these are the solutions for numbers 4 through 8. If you have any questions, continue on watching the video. I will be going over numbers 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 and walking through all of those examples. However, if you got all of them correct and you want to continue on, you can turn to the back side and continue on as a class to the next video. Okay, starting with example number 4. You were given 7EF cubed minus E squared plus 4E squared F squared. So again, we're finding the greatest common factor. So what is a factor of all three terms in this trinomial? So a factor of 7EF cubed, E squared, and 4E squared F squared. Well, immediately, just by looking at the coefficients, I see the coefficients 7, 1, and 4. And the greatest common factor in all three of those numbers is the number 1. Looking next at the variables, I see that there is an E in the first term. I also see E squared in the second term, and I see E squared in the second term. So in all three of the terms, the greatest of the E's would be just E. So I can factor out an E from the first term, an E from the second term, and an E from the third term. Again, even though the last two terms have E squared, because the first does not, I cannot factor out E squared. I also have F cubed in the first term. I don't have any F's in the second term, and I have F squared in the third term. So again, because there is no F in the second term, I cannot factor out an F. This means that the only factor that exists in all three of the terms is E. So E is the only factor, or the only, I guess, variable that I can factor out of the trinomial. So if I factor out the E from the first term, 7EF cubed divided by E equals 7F cubed. Negative E squared divided by E equals negative E. And negative 4E squared F squared divided by E is positive 4E F squared. So this is my factored form of the trinomial. Again, if I wanted to check to make sure that I did this correctly, I would take the factored form, distribute the E to all three of the terms inside of the parentheses, and just make sure that it matches with the trinomial that I started with. So E times 7F cubed is 7EF cubed. E times negative E is negative E squared. And E times 4EF squared is positive 4E squared F squared. So checking to see that this trinomial matches the trinomial that I started with. It looks like they are the same, so that means that I checked my answer and it is correct. Example number 5, you were given 5b squared plus 45b. So you have two terms in this binomial. You have 5b squared and 45b. We're trying to find the greatest common factor, so we see that there is a b squared in the first term and a b in the second term, meaning that of both of the terms, what they both have in common is b. I also see that I have the coefficients 5 and the coefficient 45. The greatest common factor of 5 and 45 is the number 5. So both the number 5 and 45 have the number 5 as a factor. So what this means is that I have 5b as my greatest common factor. So 5b is the greatest factor that exists in both of the terms in my binomial. So I'm going to factor out the 5b by dividing both of the terms by 5b. So 5b squared divided by 5b equals b. 45b divided by 5b equals positive 9. So this is the factored form of my binomial. Checking to see that I got the correct factored form, what I would do is distribute the 5b to both terms in my parentheses and just make sure that it matches the original binomial I started with. So 5b times b equals 5b squared. 5b times 9 equals positive 45b. And it does look like if I check my binomial with the binomial that I started with, they are the same. So I did factor it correctly. Okay, moving on to example number 6. Okay, example number 6, I have 10x squared minus 105x plus 135. Again, trying to find the greatest common factor. I see that I have 3 terms in this trinomial, 10x squared, negative 105x, and positive 135. I have an x squared in the first term, I have an x in the second term, and I have no x's in my third term, meaning that x is not a factor of this trinomial. Moving on to the coefficients, because I have no other variables, I have a 10, I have a negative 105, and I have a positive 135. So of those 3 numbers, again, I'm trying to find the greatest common factor. So the largest number that is divisible in all 3 of those numbers. Let's see, it looks like all 3 of those numbers are divisible by 5. Just checking the factors of 10 first. I have 1, 2, 5, and 10 are the factors. Well, the greatest common factor would mean that all 3 of the numbers are divisible by the same number. If I check 1, yes, 1 is divisible in all 3 terms. The number 2 is not divisible, or is not a factor of 105 or 135, so I know I'm not using the number 2. The number 5 is a factor of 105 and 135, and the number 10 is not a factor of 105 and 135. So the greatest common factor of all 3 of those terms would have to be 5. So I know that all 3 terms in this trinomial are divisible by 5. They are not all divisible by x, so the GCF in this example is actually only the number 5. So I would factor out a 5, meaning divide 5 from all 3 of the terms. 10x squared divided by 5 equals 2x squared. Negative 105 divided by 5 equals negative 21x. 135 divided by 5 equals positive 27. So this is the factored form of my trinomial. Lastly, just checking to make sure that I factored this correctly by distributing the 5 back to all the terms inside of the parentheses. 5 times 2x squared equals 10x squared. 5 times negative 21x equals negative 105x. And 5 times 27 equals positive 135. So checking to make sure that this trinomial does match the trinomial that I started with. It looks like it does, so I factored it correctly. Moving on to the next example, number 7. In number 7, you are given 25 mp squared minus 45 mp. So in example number 7, you have a binomial. You have 2 terms. In the first term and in the second term, we see that we have an m that exists in both terms. So m is part of the GCF. We see that we have p squared, so we have 2 p's being multiplied. We also have a p in the second term, meaning that the variable p, since it exists in both terms, is also part of my GCF. And lastly, looking at the coefficient, I have 25 and negative 45. In both the numbers 25 and 45, the greatest common factor is the number 5. So 5 MP is the greatest common factor of this binomial, so we are going to factor out the 5 MP, meaning that we're dividing 5 MP from both of the terms. 25 MP squared divided by 5 MP equals 5P. 45 MP, or negative 45 MP divided by 5 MP equals negative 9. So this is the factored form of our binomial. Lastly, checking to make sure that this is correct, distribute the 5 MP back to everything inside of the parentheses. 5 MP times 5P equals 25 MP squared. 5 MP times negative 9 is negative 45 MP. Checking to see that this binomial is the same as the original binomial we started with. They are the same, so that means that my factored form was correct.